Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
We remain out east, talking to the nation's capital, and obviously we've got Maude here with me.
Hello.
Maude, how has the offseason been now that you've kind of taken a rear view glance into the brief playoff experience for the Sens this year?
Yeah, this is our first upload on the Ottawa channel since the elimination in Game 6. So, yeah, it's been a while, eh? I think it doesn't sting anymore. Like, I tried to be pretty positive after the Sens got eliminated, but I think even more as time has gone on, I'm just pretty chill with how things played out. Especially since it was a series against the Leafs, I expected to be, like, completely tilted and just, like, really angry with how a loss could have potentially played out, but all things considered, I think it was a great season for the Sens. So we look on the bright side and we look forward to next season, which is what we'll be doing in this video.
Yeah, and I gotta say, because I came on with you during the playoffs, and you were pretty doom and gloom when we were last together. So
Yeah,
good to hear
because that was
great
the
cloud is-
3-0 hole after Game 3 when you were on with me. They turned it around a little bit
See,
to
I'm
make
gonna
it
take
close,
credit
you
for
know?
that. I'm gonna take some credit for that.
Yeah,
Well, because we all know my other predictions have all come true.
that's true. That's true. I'm trying to remember. Were you saying you were saying that it wasn't going to be a sweep? I can't remember.
I
now.
was saying that the Sens needed to be optimistic and believe in the team. I remember that.
And they did a pretty good job of believing in themselves and not thinking that it's over being down 3-0, even though it was super close in Game 4 as well. Could have been a sweep in overtime, and then had a great game in Game 5, and Game 6 was as close as it can be. That's how it goes in the playoffs. The margins are super slim between all these playoff teams a lot of the time.
And it finally feels like Ottawa is out of that rebuild phase. Now they're trying to ramp up and get to where that playoff run can go a little deeper. So when we were talking before I started up the recording, you're saying the Sens have got a lot of their work done already. So why don't you kind of briefly touch on that?
Yeah, I think that's honestly one of the more encouraging things for me this offseason is that Steve Staios has already done the biggest moves that he needed to do, in my opinion. A lot of fans want to see a huge swing for the fences in free agency, you know, just bidding for the highest forward or best forward available, you know. But I don't really think a move like that is in the cards for the Sens, just because I think they have most of their roster spots filled out already, other than depth players. And part of that is Steve Staios getting the Fabian Zetterlund contract done a few weeks ago. And with the money that they paid him, it looks like they're probably going to be playing him as a top 6 forward, or at least like third line with power play time as well. So that seems like he's sort of their top 6 addition for the year, because coming in at the trade deadline, he played, I think, the first 11 or 12 games on the 4th line before getting a chance to be moved up. So I think that there's the team thinks that there's a lot more production there to come from him. So that was huge to get that done early and not have RFA negotiations linger on into July. And then as we're recording here today, it was just yesterday that Claude Giroux signed, which again is absolutely huge to get that done before July 1st, because there was rumors that if he hit the market, he could be getting upwards of like $5 million, $6 million. So the deal that he ended up taking was a fantastic hometown discount. And to be honest, the fact that he signed for a lower amount makes me wonder where he's going to be playing in the lineup this season for the Sens, because he still mostly played top 6 last year, but he's getting way up there in age now, and it's only a 1-year deal with a lower cap hit. Maybe he shifts into more of a depth role, and like I said, maybe Zetterlund gets more of that ice time. Maybe that's going to be more of the look for the top 6 there. So those are two really important things for this team's forward core, just to see how it'll be set up going into October and preseason in September. And then the other huge thing was that Nick Jensen had off-season surgery, and they weren't sure if he was going to be ready for training camp. So Steve Staios goes out and he gets Jordan Spence from the LA Kings, which I think was a fantastic pickup for just a 3rd-round pick and a 6th-round pick. That's a steal for this guy's analytics, his performance in pretty limited ice time, but still like average third pair like time on ice. He had really good results for the LA Kings. So the fact that you can get a player like that for super cheap in terms of the trade value, especially since that 3rd-round pick, the Sens gained just by moving down 2 spots in the 1st round. So they basically made something out of nothing there, turned it into a player who Spence can be assurance for the start of the season if Jensen is still injured, or when Jensen comes back if he's kind of lost a step after the surgery and the long recovery period. Spence could maybe step into the top 4. More likely, though, probably plays most of the season on the third pair with Clevin after Jensen is back and healthy. So having all of that set up and good to go, we have our 7 NHLD. We have pretty much all our top 9 forwards. I think it's just about filling the depth. So we're going to talk a bit about what to expect on July 1st, but I think the fact that all of those problems are already solved is fantastic work by Steve Staios.
Before we talk about the first, I think we need to talk about the draft, because there's kind of 2 opinions about how the Sens drafted this year. A lot of people really like Logan Hensler, who you said managed to drop down 2 spots and still get what some people are calling the best right-handed shot offensively out of the draft. But then I think from there, it was kind of a bit of a reach central is what a lot of people are saying. Like, Blake Vanek, obviously, son of Thomas Vanek, has links to the city, but is there more than that? I'll let you answer.
So the thing with the Sens draft class is that I think a lot of people from the outside will look at it and say, oh, this is bad because they reach for these players, or oh, this is bad because these players are more risky picks. Whereas the criticism within the Sens fan base for the entire past 6-7 years of Pierre Dorion being the GM and all the probably, I don't know how much scout turnover they had after he was replaced, but we probably still have a lot of the same amateur scouts. The main criticism within the fan base was that they were picking too many safe players who are just huge guys who are physical, and you're just hoping that they can become a 4th liner or a 3rd pairing D for you. And we weren't really drafting any boom or bust offensive potential prospects. So this year it's different, and I think that's why a lot of Sens fans, regardless of what people outside of the fan base think about the Sens draft, I think that's why Sens fans are mostly excited about the picks. Is it's players that they would not have been picking previously. Especially they drafted 2 Russian players. They hadn't drafted a Russian since 2006.
Oh wow!
So that alone in itself is, and that may have been a Eugene Melnick thing, but that in itself is already wow, things are different. And just a couple of the later round picks who were forwards, like you mentioned, Blake Vanek. I think that people call that a reach. They say that they took him too early, and they always say oh, I don't know why they traded up to get him. Well, I know why they traded up to get him. It's because they had intel that another team was interested in him, right? So I feel like when people criticize that sort of thing, it's oh, you shouldn't have traded up. It's, well, they obviously had a reason for it, right? And Blake Vanek was ranked lower than he went, but I think he's a really interesting prospect. He's got a hard shot, and he's a big body, and son of a former NHLer who was a first-line player in his heyday. I feel like that's a pretty good bet to make.
Was a top 3 forward when you could clutch and grab, because
in that era,
the main talking about Blake is he struggles skating, so that is something that can be coached up though. And also I think a lot of people are kind of not really looking at that Lucas Beckman pick, because it was a 3rd round goaltender, but hey,
that guy's got great stats.
They're not quite as good as Dustin Wolf's were in the minors, but I understand.
Still really good though for a 3rd round pick.
Oh yeah, I understand. It seemed that was more, we're just going to take the best player available, which certainly seems to match how NHL teams are drafting. But now that we've looked at the draft, talked about the off season, let's talk a little bit about free agency, because as you said, there's not a ton of work to do. Just going to be kind of painting around the fringes, as they say. Yeah,
so the way I look at the Sens' current cap space, I've got a breakdown on my phone here. On Puckpedia, they are shown as having about 8.2 million in cap space, and you look at that and you say oh, well, they can sign a great player for 7 million or whatever, but this projection is not including a backup goalie, which should be Levi Merilainen. Probably sign him for somewhere between 900K to $1 million. And then it's also missing multiple forwards for the 4th line and the depth. So if you include a backup goalie, 2 more forwards, and say that's roughly 900K to $1 million for each of those players, then you're down to about 5.3 million cap space with 1 more forward spot where you could sign someone. So this is the thing where I think we could see them go for sort of like a mid-level free agent who's sort of like a second line, third line tweener. Like I wouldn't be opposed to an addition like that. It would have to be in the $3 to $4 million range. But just when I look at the list of available free agent forwards, I'm like, everyone who I'm interested in that kind of a role would cost way more money than that. Like someone like Pia Suter, he's going to get way overpaid being a center who scored 25 goals.
And being one of the few centers on the market, like, period.
Exactly. So he's probably going to get like 5 million plus, which is already out of our price range. And then, of course, anyone above him in terms of point scoring is like bona fide top six forward who will get way more than that. But that's the first kind of guy in this list that I have sorted by point scoring where I'm like, oh, he could be like second, third line tweener for us, but still he would be too expensive. And then sorting by points, you've got Evgeny Dadonov. I don't think he's coming back for various reasons. Jack Roslovic, that's a guy who could be interesting, but he had a career year of 22 goals. He's not like typically repeating that production from year to year. So maybe a guy like that you could throw in your bottom six and maybe second power play unit. I could see something like that. But then you got guys who have a bunch of holes in their game, like Kuzmenko. I don't see that being a fit. James Van Riemsdyk, maybe, but he's so old and so slow. We already have Giroux as our really old guy. And then it's just like fourth liners, right? Like Corey Perry, Connor Brown. I would like to see Connor Brown maybe come back to Ottawa on like a cheap fourth liner contract.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. But yeah, then you just go farther down the list and it's just fourth liners. So like I would be surprised if they did make an addition in that sort of like $4 million range with that remaining cap space. I think it'll mostly be filling out just the depth. There was a rumor from Bruce Garrioch that they'd be interested in Tanner Jeannot for the fourth line. He might be a little bit more of an expensive fourth liner just because he's huge, throws a lot of hits and fights, so there might be a bit of a bidding war for him. So I do think that could be a signing that we see. Maybe they pay him like north of $2 million and then fill out the rest of the depth with cheaper guys who are sort of like AHL, NHL tweeners. But yeah, a lot of fans want to see the Sens make a huge swing to improve the forward core, like get a big goal scorer like Brock Besser or something. But I just don't see that fitting in the team's cap structure right now. If you were to get a guy like that, I think you got to move off of Drake Batherson in a trade or something, or maybe dump David Perron's salary. But I don't think they're going to do that because he had a really tough year with injuries and personal issues with his family, which I think are all sorted now. But just because the team had to stick by him during all that, I think they're going to want to stick by him for the last year of the contract too. I don't think they're just going to dump his contract and kick him to the curb. I think they're going to want to treat that player right and let him finish that contract here. So
that makes sense.
I just think if the Sens are going to make any big moves, they're probably going to do it by trade if possible.
My one question is, you said you want to go young with your goaltending. Do you think that the leadership team could say, Alex Lyon is standing there as a solid backup candidate? Do you think that could be where some resources get allocated to someone along that like?
I like that option. I think Alex Lyon has been a really good like number 2, number 3 sort of goalie. He's always been in these like tandems or in Detroit they were rotating 3 goalies straight up, and he would still put up pretty good numbers despite not playing consistently. If that's a guy that you could get for relatively cheap, maybe start Maryland and Belleville, or maybe even just to do a 3 goalie rotation like Detroit did. I'm not opposed to that. A guy like Alex Lyon would be great. If not him or someone similar in that vein who played in the NHL last year, maybe like an AHL veteran goalie who has played some NHL games before. And then you could start Maryland as the backup and have that veteran down in the AHL that you could call up. Dan Vladar, look at that. Here's a question for you. Do you think Dan Vladar is going to get paid in free agency, or do you think he's going to be more of a cheaper contract? Because I'm not really sure where to value him.
That's actually a really interesting question. I think he's more looking for a situation where he can be an actual tandem goaltender rather than looking for top dollar in this round of free agency. Because I think with his numbers last year in relatively limited duty, he was good. So if he can get on somewhere, I think Ottawa would be a good landing spot. I think San Jose could be a good landing spot, but where he gets to actually play occasionally rather than being Dustin Wolf's understudy.
Yeah, because it's time for Dustin Wolf to just take over. So.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, when I think about a guy like Vladar, I'm like, he could work as a backup for the Sens, but I wonder if just because like the amount of games he played last year and he did pretty well, he might get a little bit of a bigger contract. Like if it's anything above 2 million for a backup goalie, it doesn't sound like a lot. But if it's anything more than that, I don't think it makes sense for the Sens because they're already letting Anton Forsberg go, who was making 2.5 million. You want to go cheaper in that role to allocate the money elsewhere, as they've been doing with already like signing Zetterlund, bringing in Spence. So I think just having Marilainen as a cheap backup goalie is a great idea, just to save money and then, get some other veteran in there that you can sign for cheap. I think Dan Vladar might be a little too expensive, maybe.
I think that's a good point to call it, though. Thank you so much, Maude, for sitting down, and best of luck. I'm sure we'll talk again before the season starts.
Sounds good. Thanks, Conrad.